Good afternoon. Welcome to our third and final session of Altogether's Three Things Summit. I am Jamie Mitchell. I'm the founder at Altogether, and I will be chairing today's discussion on my favorite topic about progressive business practices and how to be a good business. At Altogether, we offer small business owners and CEOs up to 5 hours of free advice from leading CEOs, some of the most successful CEOs in the country. And we've united this army of volunteer advisors around a simple mission to help SMEs build back and thrive post-COVID. And this summit is very much about the thriving, about how we build back better as small businesses. And this week we've heard about how many businesses can and should continue to use and double down on some of the digital tools and new digital channels that they have been trialing in lockdown. We've talked about how we can build on what we've learned about our teams and our ways of working to build better workplace cultures post-lockdown. And today we're going to address a very important question, which is how can we build back better, not just for our business, but for the planet and for society. Before we get to that, some housekeeping, if I may. First of all, there are two ways for you to interact as with the audience. You can chat or you can Q&A. The chat is there for you to engage with other participants. Please make sure you click all participants if you want people to respond. But if you specifically want to ask a question of our panel, please put it in the Q&A, and hopefully there'll be time at the end to take some of those questions. And if you're going to tweet during today's event, which I would hope you would, please feel free to use the hashtag 3thingssummit, all spelled out. So to today's panel, before I go to Sharon White, the chair of John Lewis Partnership, and her three things, let me introduce you to who is on our panel today. We have Sally Bailey, a purpose-driven chair and non-exec chair of Weird Fish and many other brands and organizations, and the former CEO of White Stuff, where she led that business for over 9 years. Tim Lee, the CEO of Mindful Chef since 2018, previously a decade with Marks and Spencer's and Tesco's. Natalie Campbell, a social entrepreneur, author, and broadcaster, co-CEO of Belu since March 2020. Natalie has founded many social businesses and sits on many boards, social enterprise and charities. And then Douglas Lamont, who has worked at Innocent for 15 years and been the CEO there for the past 8, having taken over from the founders. Innocent, of course, and Douglas, one of the leading lights of progressive business in the UK. So I couldn't be more delighted to have this panel to talk about these very important issues. Before I introduce us to Sharon White, the idea of calling the summit Three Things was because I wanted to make this as actionable and positive and forward-thinking as possible for all participants attending and then following the content as we post it after the event. So we're really looking for those bits of advice that are about what do we do now as small business owners or CEOs, or in the leadership teams of small business, or amongst the broader team. What do we do now to build back better? So we're going to go first of all to listen to Sharon White's Three Things, if we can have the video, please.
Hi, I'm Sharon White, and I'm chairman of the John Lewis Partnership. Three pieces of advice. If you're out there in that sort of difficult time running a small business, I'd say piece of advice number one is have a plan. And I think during COVID times, when obviously the situation is uniquely uncertain, not just, the roller coaster of the last year, but looking ahead this year, I think it can be easy to be, quite sort of battered and by sort of day-to-day changes and events. And I think that's when having a plan and being really clear about your distinctiveness as a business, what's different about you as a brand, And, obviously there'll be mid-course corrections and adjustments. But I think having a plan is absolutely critical. Second piece of advice I would say is really think about your networks and either businesses in the sector who've been really successful or businesses internationally that you admire, because it can be incredibly easy when you're sort of 24/7 into the day job, not to look up and out at successes elsewhere and other business leaders who you can learn from, they can learn from you. And I have certainly, as somebody who's come into retail relatively late in my career, I found it incredibly important, valuable, just to build up some new friendships and people you can ring on a sort of dark night for advice and support. And then I guess piece of advice number 3, I would say, is surrounding yourself with brilliant people. So there's the sort of old adage, which is, always hire people who are much better than yourselves, and having talent in your team. I think this is a great time to hire, with the economy obviously very dynamic, going through an enormous transition, probably a bigger structural transition than we've had possibly for a century. And young people who are wanting to work for companies with clear purpose and clear societal impact. So great time to hire if you've got a great brand and great purpose, and surround yourself by lots of brilliant people that that you can look up to and admire in future years. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice, I guess. First of all, have a plan, even during COVID. Secondly, really cultivate your networks of other business people. And thirdly, surround yourselves by talent, particularly talent who really want to work for great brands and businesses with clear purpose. And best of luck.
Thank you, Sharon, for your advice. The truth is, COVID has laid bare stark inequalities in society, of the health, income, and opportunity, and I guess the fragility of our planet. But it also encouraged business to give back and to do more and to contribute. So, in that vein, I'm delighted to turn first to Sally for your 3 things to build back better for planet and society.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, the first thing I'd say is that you don't have to be a JLP or massive business to build back better, do things differently. And my first piece of advice is really think small to make big changes. So my first piece of advice is question everything. So we don't want to go back to doing the things the way we did them before. What we want to do is do things better. So let's think about not doing the same things as we did before. So question everything, question the small things. So question, do I need to fly something in terms of products to make it sell? Before COVID, everything was about profit. Now people are thinking wider than that. And us that have been involved in sustainable businesses have been thinking that for a while, but more and more people are now. So question the way that you do things to all sorts of things, the small things and the big things. So my questioning everything, as a non-exec, whenever I go for interviews or go to talk to companies about becoming a non-exec, I have 2 sort of non-negotiables. One is, do you pay real living wage? And the second one is, do you pay the right amount of tax? Not the least you can get away with, the right amount of tax. So that's my 2 questions that I would ask everybody that I'd ever work with. And just asking those questions makes people think about it. So on a smaller level, I used to work with a head of buying that every time we talked about any product, she'd say, so where does it come from? Can we get that without having to fly it in? Again, just a small thing, but a small thing that leads you to think, do we need to fly? Do we need to fly to do a shoot? Do we need to fly to see suppliers? We've learned a lot through COVID. Let's make sure that we keep those learnings and implement them going forward. Second one is brought about by recruitment that I've been involved with recently. And I think, again, old recruitment practices aren't necessarily the best ones. So old ways of recruiting were go get a recruitment company, go out, get the best list of people, get a short list, interview people and get them. What we have to think now is that the right thing to do in terms of diversity, equity and inclusion? Are we going to slightly different places to find our candidates? Are we getting diverse lists? So my last big recruitment I did was for a charity, and we used a Black-owned, Black-run company to go out and find trustees for us. In commercial world, when we look now for long lists of potential candidates, we look for where is the minority ethnic representation? Where's the disability representation? So 15% or so of our of the population has a disability or a long-term health condition. Is that represented on the list? The male-female split, obviously we're the majority, 51% female, but let's make sure that we're looking at, I always say 40-40-20, 40% women, 40% men and 20% either. That's a few examples, but just thinking against, the reason we want diversity, equity and inclusion, the main thing is because it's the right thing to do. The second thing is that businesses work better when they have a company that looks like their customer base and looks like the sort of workplace that the top talent wants to work into. So my second piece of advice, question the way that you recruit. Another one on that, just briefly, is I recently started working with a charity that seeks to put refugees into gainful employment in this country. And one of the things that holds people back there are gaps on their CVs. A gap on your CV doesn't mean that you're lazy, doesn't mean that you have been out of the workplace for a bad reason. So again, just question the way that we used to do things, not necessarily the right way of doing things. We just want the best candidates now. And my last piece of advice is a very, very practical piece of advice. I've already alluded to it. It's pay fair, real living wage. So that's for London is £10.85. For the UK, it's £9.50 an hour, I should say. So I don't think we can say that we are a fair company unless we pay real living wage. And that is a challenge for companies, particularly if you've got a lot of people on lower wages. So it doesn't have to be today. But for example, the company I work with, I chair Weird Fish, we have looked and seen that we can do that. We're planning to do it over the next 2 years. We're doing really well, so we're hoping we can do it in a year now. So just because you're not doing it now doesn't mean you're evil. It means that you haven't done it yet. So make a plan, look at real living wage and see how you can get it into your company. Also ask companies that you work with, whether it's a supplier or whether it's a sort of company that you're collaborating with. Again, sort of combining the two of asking questions and looking at how can we be fairer? Let's make sure we're paying the real living wage. So summary, my three pieces of advice are question everything. One example of that is to question recruitment practices and pay real living wage.
Thank you very much, Sally. Tim.
Thanks, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. I think for me, I'd kick off to say, we talked about big businesses. We're a relatively small business, Mindful Chef, so I think you can come from both angles on this journey. And I think my reflection would be looking forward that the pandemic's made people think much more around purpose and around what's really important as an individual, as a consumer, just as how they live their lives. We've had much more reflection time. So I'd kick off with my first kind of learning is be really clear on what your purpose is. So really be clear on what you stand for. To use an example, for us, our purpose, why we get up every day to do what we do in our business is to make healthy eating easy. And this kind of ties into a social purpose underneath that. Why is it important? I think it's important because you can use those purposes as statements to act as filters for everything you do. And so if you get into difficult situations, in which we all do as running businesses, about what the right thing is to do, if you then turn back to that statement and then go, well, does it do what we're trying to do? Does it answer that question, yes or no? Then I think that's really powerful for you and your teams to embrace and use as a practical way to navigate through some of the difficult decisions. I think tying that into your statement, your purpose, into social, environmental impacts is critically important as well. I mean, and for us, that's we've created a purpose that allows you to do that. That mission it allows us to do that. So again, when you do that, think about it. So my advice would be go down and write down what is your purpose. You know, sit down with your teams and commit to it and understand how that purpose both works from a business point of view, but works from a social environmental impact point of view. So that's kind of number one. My number 2 point is really about building a culture around purpose. So it's, for me, it's not, you know, purpose is not about just a CSR. It's not about that. It's about actually how do you live and run your business the way you want to do it. And I think to do that, you really need to take your team on the journey and build people and planet into your company culture by making them as much a part of this as framework is, as probably profit is in your business. Practically, what does that mean? What we did was we did an away day and we created the specific values that drive that behavior and guide each member of your team. So it's ingrained into how we operate and the values of how we operate. Really importantly, they live it. And the other thing I would do, and we've done, is I'd embed some events that bring it to life. So for illustration purposes, we run a beach clean every summer where we invite our customers and our ambassadors to do this in our teams, and everyone gets involved. We run a reverse advent calendar every Christmas where, you know, you can give back to, and we give back to food banks. So these are really important events to bring purpose, living back into the culture of the business. And I think, you know, the great thing about that is it really drives a sense of loyalty, not only with your teams, but also with your customers, and makes equally a great sense for planet, but also a great sense for business, because your customers are engaged, your team's engaged. It's good business sense. So again, you know, build a culture around purpose and really drive that through a framework of helping your teams understand that, but bringing it to life in how you do things. And my last one is be transparent. Sustainability isn't about everyone doing it perfectly. It's about everyone doing something. You know, get going with it. Practically, you know, set a target. You know, set a target for net zero. Make a commitment. Go out and engage a third party to help you. We're big believers in measuring. So we've got climate partners to help us measure where we are. That helps you start to measure, engage your teams, engage your suppliers. My other advice is sign up to B Corp. It gives you a score. It illustrates where you are. And if you really want to get to the head heights of being as successful as the likes of Patagonia, you can see that score. You know what they do. They can help you on that journey. So really practical, sensible kind of building blocks that allow you to be transparent with where you are, and equally with your customers and with external members and the outside world. Often people will question you on this journey around purpose. And you'll say, well, we do it for our reasons, but you also can hand out information that says, look, this is what we do from a third party perspective, which is quite helpful. So they're my 3 things. You know, really be clear on your purpose, do practical things to get that, write it down, be clear about how you transfer that purpose to building a culture, engage your teams in the culture and the values, create events to demonstrate that, bring it to life with your customers, with your teams, and then be transparent, measure it. You know, be really and get on that journey, start it, make it actionable, and start living it.
Tim, brilliant. Thank you so much. Natalie, turning to you now.
Thanks, Jamie. So my response centers on the individual. As leaders moving a business forward or trying to engage teams, supply chains, partners with a purpose, it's difficult to do unless you yourself know your own purpose. Knowing your North Star, knowing what gets you out of bed in the morning. So my three things framework is actually borrowed from the Claw Fellowship, of which I'm a fellow. So the first part is know yourself. in knowing yourself, what makes you tick, what your own moral compass is, your shadow side, your tolerances for decision making, for thinking about the environment, for thinking about social impact. Really asking yourself what you actually care about means that you can then show up and lead and be yourself. So the next part of the framework is be yourself. And in being yourself, when you start the process that Tim and Sally have alluded to in terms of creating a framework for what it means within your business, you're doing it authentically. If you create a purpose that ultimately doesn't chime with what you think, feel, believe as a leader, there'll always be a tension. There'll always be someone that can call you out on, well, are we really doing this authentically? Because it starts with you. It starts with how you model the framework. And then the last bit is look after yourself. In building a business that has a purpose that goes beyond performance metrics, it's not easy. There will be trade-offs. There will be times when emotionally you need to have very difficult conversations that you could have sidestepped in a different era, in a different time. And so if you don't look after yourself and your own ability to manage the day-to-day challenge of making decisions that put your purpose front and center, then it might feel like this purpose journey is a heavy weight. So bringing the three together, know yourself, be yourself, look after yourself. How, if you're thinking that still feels a bit far away from where I am, get a coach. Look at creating a leadership development plan for yourself, where you ask yourself those questions if a coach is not affordable, and create space within your working time or whenever you can to read, to grow, to reflect. If you're busy at the coalface doing the doing every waking moment, you will not have the space to think about purpose for yourself. If you dive straight into purpose for the business without doing this work first, it will feel like an uphill slog and you won't fundamentally get it. So start there.
Natalie, that was brilliant. And for those of you who worry about the cost of getting a coach, don't forget, this is why Altogether is here. We can give you up to 5 hours with people like this lovely panel you have in front of you today, who will help you uncover yourself and be yourself and find your purpose. Douglas, if I can end with you, please.
The disadvantage of going last is that it's a bit of everything. After 3 days of advice, I think everyone's probably had enough of 3 things. But I'll try and finish well. Today is actually Innocent's 22nd birthday, believe it or not. And on our birthdays, we always do a bit of reflecting, don't we? And it made me reflect back to, well, what made Innocent successful in the first place? And I think what made Innocent successful in the first place is that we got really clear really early what was our unique point of difference. And actually, very similarly to Tim, how do we make it easy for people to do themselves some good was that sort of founding thought of the business. And that distilled itself down to simple, natural, and great tasting. And those 3 things have been, watchwords for the business. Over those 22 years, where we've lost our way, and there's been a number of years where we've kind of got distracted, either because we've been growing so much and we've overinvested in the growth and not in our kind of unique point of difference, or because we've listened to retailers too much who want a value engineered proposition that hits a certain price point and all the rest of it. That's when we've lost our way. So my kind of first piece of advice is sit down with yourself or with your leadership teams, and do you agree on what your unique point of difference is? That's a good starting point. And if you do, compared to all the other things that are coming at you, and particularly with COVID, so much has been coming at us, it's rapid fire. Are you really investing enough in that, whether that's time, energy, money, capabilities, compared to all the other things that you have to invest in? So be really clear on your unique point of difference, and are you investing enough in it? The second one, no surprise, very similar to others. I think the thing that's made Innocent successful over a long period of time is a sense of purpose and is a sense of clarity around that purpose. But the way I would build it, I totally agree with Natalie about for yourself and with Tim in terms of the purpose point. I think the thing that we've done well at Innocent and has been really important is not just purpose. On that purpose page, we've got purpose, to make natural, delicious food and drink that helps people and the planet live well and die old. But we've also got vision to become the Earth's favorite little healthy food and drinks company, and that's a classic big, hairy, audacious goal for those of you who are fans of Jim Collins. And we've got values, and sitting underneath that kind of lockup is strategy, which then we use, probably every 3 years we refresh to say, right, what's the next stepping stone towards that vision, and is that strategy in line with our purpose, and have we got the team to deliver it against, in terms of the values? So can you on one piece of paper write your purpose, your vision, your values, and does your current strategy match up to that? Again, I think is a really great exercise for you and your leadership teams to do, because it's that combination. Purpose by its nature is a broad church. It brings a wide group of talented people towards you, but if you don't organize them from there in the right way, so you know what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to, it can also be chaos, because everybody can attach their own personal bias to that purpose without that structure that sits around it. So sort of a bit like Tim's point about creating culture around your purpose, create structure of decision making around your purpose as well. And then the third one, of course, on your birthday, you look forward and go, right, what comes next? And I think what we all need as business leaders, whether we're a big business, whether it's a medium-sized business or a small business, is that we need the environment and the world around us to be a good one to operate successfully. We need a fairer and more sustainable, future for all of us. How do we get that? Well, my final piece of advice is, how, as a business leader, are you thinking, how do I spend as much time collaborating as I am competing? And, the world of business has always been about compete to win. If we all carry on doing that, we are not going to have a fairer, more sustainable future. And so how, as a leader, can you collaborate more? And whether that's joining an amazing community like B Corp, whether that's just, openly sharing. In Innocent's case, we're building the world's most sustainable manufacturing facility right now, and we've committed to open source all the sustainability learnings to that, even to our closest competitors. Right now I'm helping one of my competitors become a B Corp, because ultimately it's a team sport. If we don't all move, it's not going to be good enough. Innocent being good on its own doesn't get you anywhere. The collaboration that's required to move this forward is really important. And not surprisingly, Jamie, my final kind of piece of advice, given the sponsor of today, is about the Better Business Act. And the Better Business Act is ultimately trying to say, how do we in the UK, in boardrooms, get directors to think people, profit, and planet in balance? Because those things in balance, that being the default mindset of directors of all sizes and all types of companies, will lead to that collaboration, as it does amongst the B Corp community, will lead to faster progress to that sustainable, fairer future that we're all hanging out for post the crisis that we've all just experienced. So my final to do and piece of advice is, please support us. We want businesses of all types, from tiny businesses, and we've got loads of those supporting us, right through to the big businesses like Sharon and John Lewis Partnership, who are supporting us, like Iceland and other big names. But please go and support the Better Business Act. And I know that the link is going up as we speak, and we can talk more about that. But understand your unique point of difference. Can you put purpose, vision, values, and strategy on a page and really say those things are consistent with each other? And think about, how do I spend as much time collaborating as I do competing? Because that's what we all need right now.
Right, I think we'll end there. I think we're done. Seriously, so much to unpick, and I don't know where to start. Actually, I do know where to start. First of all, I'm going to join my fellow alumni of Innocent, Paula McKenzie, who's in the audience today, and wishing Innocent happy birthday. 22 years is an extraordinary achievement. Second of all, Douglas, you mentioned our partner today is the Better Business Act, which reminded me I failed at the top of this event today, the session today, to thank our partners, which is very poor of me because we would not be here without them. So if you can just give me a moment, I do want to say thank you to Director Bank, Investec and CMS, who are partners, long-term partners of Altogether, and our event partners, Grayling, Q5, BGF, and the Better Business Act. So Douglas, I love the Better Business Act. You know this from when you first brought it to my attention a few weeks ago, and I just jumped on it. I've been looking for some way that we can all collaborate together to bang this drum for broader change. But for those who aren't familiar with it, what's the Better Business Act trying to achieve? And what do you want everybody in the audience to do today?
Yeah, so what we're trying to achieve is a relatively simple change to the Companies Act. That in the Companies Act as it is today is at best ambiguous and at worst a hiding place for people that say, well, the law tells me to profit maximize, so that's what I'm going to do. What we want the Companies Act, and particularly the bit about directors' responsibilities, which for those of the lawyers amongst you is section 172, to make it very clear that directors' responsibility is to align those interests, align the interests of shareholders. Absolutely, shareholders are central to this, but to the balance people, profit and planet in the mindset of directors. Directors still have to work out how to balance those things, but we want the sense that every single director is thinking, right, balance is the thing that I have to get right. Not just because it's the right thing to do. You know, what we're showing more and more with all the companies that are B Corps and big, successful, purpose-led business, it's the smart thing to do. It's how to create long-term value. But we have to remove this niggle that sits in the current Companies Act that tells people, well, it's fine to profit maximize, and whatever the cost to society, whether of your pollution or your impact on, you know, society or your employees, the negative impacts, that's not for you to worry about. That's wrong, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. And the law, as it stands, is perpetuating that. A simple change, and it's not many words. If you go to the website, you'll see we don't need to change many words to completely change the sentiment of what is expected of directors. And it's that sentiment shift. It's mandating that sentiment, which is what we're after. What you need to do is click on the link in the chat to the betterbusinessact.org, have a read, have a look, and then there's an Act Now button. Act Now, put your company's name, and please support us, because what we're also trying to show to government, who initial indications that, you know, that they like this, but what they want to see is that this is well supported across the business community. This isn't just a few weirdy beardies in sandals trying to make some strange change. This is supported by all types of businesses, and it's great we've got the big businesses. Great that Sharon White and others at John Lewis and Waitrose are really supporting this, but I want to show that this is for all businesses, for small businesses, for medium-sized businesses. So the more support we can have from all of you, the better. So act now, sign up for the Better Business Act.
Thank you, Douglas. And I do encourage everybody to do that. You know, Milton Friedman's famous maximize profit, or the only responsibility of business to maximize profit, has led a perception of capitalism for 30 years now. And the momentum before COVID was there for the shift to happen. But COVID has allowed, I think, people to really collaborate and get together behind this agenda. Interestingly, inside your reworded Companies Act is a redefining of the purpose of business, from being to benefit the shareholders to benefit the shareholders and benefit wider society and the environment. But purpose is, of course, as we've already heard a little bit today, is very contextual, the idea of business purpose. We've heard about Tim's. Natalie, could you tell us a little bit more about Belu's purpose and how that plays out in the strategies, the plans and the values of the business to borrow Douglas's framework?
So Douglas, actually, in a change to what you proposed in terms of having a purpose, vision and values, I went into Belu and said, scrap all of that. We're just going to have a purpose, and our purpose is going to be to change the way the world sees water. And what we'll do from that purpose statement is create an OKRs framework, create an operating framework and a strategic model that is purpose, people, product and profit, and then an operating model that aligns to those 4 pillars, and then OKRs. Oh my goodness, someone's trying to drill into the house. An OKRs framework that aligns into the pillars. And then the comms bit comes in because we've redesigned our website, everything to speak to those 4 points. So we talk about our navigation is purpose, people, product, and profit. And so in doing that, we have removed the need for people to remember multiple things, and it fits on one page because it's 4 beautiful pillars. So that's the journey that we've been on at Belu. And some people will say, but you were already there. Actually, Belu's focus was to deliver £1 million to water aid per annum, which is brilliant and noble. But actually, when you make the goal of a business, especially in the pandemic year, a financial profit metric, people organize themselves to deliver that and other things get forgotten. And what wasn't coming through in that specific mission was everything that we do in terms of the environment. And so to change the way the world sees water, that brings our environmental position into lockstep with everything that we are doing in terms of social impact. And the final bit, to connect back to what Douglas was saying, I also took our board on the journey of looking at our governance. So our articles, we have changed our primary objects to be to deliver SDGs 6, 12 and 13. So SDG 6 is clean water and sanitation, 12 is responsible consumption and production, and 13 is climate action. And so therefore our directors' responsibilities are to deliver those SDGs. And that's what I'm performance managed against. I'm not performance managed against, I need the business to recover, but that's not what I'm not performance managed against how much revenue is coming through Belu. It's, are we delivering against those primary objects? And that really helps define what we do as a business.
And Natalie, that's exactly the point about the Better Business Act, which is you had to go through a complicated process to change your articles to sort of embed that, as we all have as B Corps. So we've already made these changes as B Corps to our articles, but it's convoluted. You need a lawyer. You know, what we're saying is what you've done should broadly be the default approach for all companies. So the other part of the Better Business Act is it's not a voluntary action. If the law has changed, that becomes a requirement for all companies to either adopt the standard purpose of balancing people, profit and planet, or go further and do their own, which, you know, as you've done, Natalie.
Can I just a couple of side points, because there were some 3-letter acronyms or some TLAs. OKRs, for those who don't know, I think objectives and key results. Anyway, objective setting, let's call it. And the SDGs, I think pretty much our audience will be familiar, but that's the United Nations Social and Development Goals. I'd like to get to some nitty gritty though, because in many cases, in fact, all 3 of you, Tim, Natalie, and Douglas, you have ended up in the hot seat of a business that had purpose embedded in it by its founders on day one. The vast majority of our audience and the vast majority of small and medium-sized businesses in this country did not have that. So how do they go about, I'm going to ask Sally this first off, how do you go about trying to define your purpose? How do we think about this from a point of view of a business that wasn't founded with a clarity of purpose or a documented purpose in mind?
I think when I work with businesses of like one person, when I'm mentoring startups to teams of 50 or teams of 100 that aren't founder run, but I think all smart business leaders now realise they need to have, and different ways of expressing it, whether it's a purpose, whether it's a vision and mission. I think, as Natalie said, for me, it's whatever fits your business, to make sure you know what you've got to do good and to make your way in the world, not just about making profit. So if you're a small business, and I say this sometimes to my very small teams, is have a meeting with yourself. If you don't have advisors, obviously you do, because you have all of us are all together that can help you. But
nice
sit down and think about what is your business there for? And it might be there to make money. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I think again, one of the preconceived ideas is that people and planet come at expense of profit. They don't actually. They're all completely equal. So thinking about what do you want to achieve? How do you want to make your way in the world? And what can you actually do? Natalie's talking about her business's purpose is so nicely sort of fitted into her product. What she's not going to do is stop the world flying. It's about water. So it's really easily understandable and it's achievable, really easy understandable for your team. Also needs to really resonate personally with you and your team. So first thing to do, I would say, is either have a meeting with yourself or sit down with your team and do some brainstorming around what is your products. What is your product? What are your products? What is achievable? Do the really big blue sky thinking. What problem do you want to solve in the world? Would you like to solve? And then what do you think you actually can do? And once you get to that, I think that's a really good starting point. I think bringing the whole team on the journey. When I say the team, I also mean customers and suppliers. What purposes should never be is the person at the top sitting in a room on their own, deciding what the purpose is and telling everybody else. So sit down with your team, but also, when I did purpose work at White Stuff many years ago, we spoke to our customers, we spoke to our suppliers, and the whole idea was that we had a virtuous circle where we made money and we gave money back to the causes or the cause, which was helping disadvantaged people. The more we gave back, the more money we made, the bigger percentage we could give back, and everybody was happy. Yeah. I think the other part of that is, I think, as Douglas alluded to, for me, the opposite of sustainable is unsustainable. So if businesses don't do this now, they won't be here in the future to have these conversations. People don't.
They won't be here, and they won't have the talent working for them.
They won't have talent, and they won't have the customers. People that are leaving school, leaving universities nowadays are looking for purpose beyond making rich men richer, and customers the same. And I think, back to Natalie's point, product obviously incredibly important. You can't just have a planet and people strategy without having a product strategy. But if someone else has the same product strategy as you and has a good people and planet strategy and you don't, you will lose. Customers won't buy for you, people won't want to work for you. So so sit down with your community, work out what you think you can do, what you care about, and what's achievable.
And I have found that for many businesses, it's quite hard to sit down post event of the business being set up and define the social purpose that exists underneath this business, because it probably never had a social purpose when it was set up. But what it will always have had is a purpose beyond making money. And so what I often say to people is, find the purpose, and to Tim's point, great if it can be embedded with social elements, but find the purpose that's your rallying call that gets everyone motivated. Now, how are we going to contribute to the world? Let's embed that into our values, into our organization, into our strategies, our objectives, and our plans. And that's what I want to move to, because we're now going to talk about people. We're going to talk about planet, we're going to talk about society, and we're going to talk about our people very briefly on each of these three things as ways in which we as businesses can be progressive contributors to the world. And I'm going to start with planet. And of course, the most important issue the planet faces is climate change. Both Tim and Doug, and possibly Natalie, I wasn't sure if you have committed to net zero by 2030, I believe. Look, that's great, but for a small business that could also say the same thing, actually, what should they be doing today to get on the right path to net zero? And I'll start, if I can, with you, Tim, but open it up to the panel. What should I be doing today as a small business that perhaps hasn't even really started, knows I need to be on this path, but hasn't really started doing too much in this area? What are the most important things to do this year?
I mean, I think first of all, as I said, understand where you are. Find a partner. You don't need to spend a lot of money, but find someone, a third party, that can help you just understand what your position is. Where do you have emissions? Where are your contributors towards climate? Through your chain, and while you're doing that, you can even look at small things you're doing yourselves to say, well, actually, well, what do we do that we know actually can reduce our impact? You know, for us, we always started with the idea that food waste is actually a really, really big issue. So we were like, well, okay, the business model is based on being an efficient delivery of that. It reduces food waste by, you know, making everything in smaller packs so customers have no waste. You know, they create a meal and there's no waste. So think about how your business model leans into what you can do and how then you can do even more. And at the same time, do that planning process, which allows you to then say, okay, I've got the list now. I know where my emissions are. The hard ones are always going to be, there's always going to be some really big stuff. For us, you know, the food supply chain is always going to be very challenging because you're dealing with a lot of suppliers, but there are lots of little stuff that you can do. You can change LEDs in your office. You know, that's a small thing you can do. You go out and change your energy supply. You can do that tomorrow, right? With and swaps. You can swap your energy out to someone who's sustainable. So they're really small elements. And I think really importantly for that, that indicates your teams and your colleagues, your customers, that you're serious about it. You're making small steps that you can talk about. So it's look, these aren't big solutions, but they're on the journey to get there.
So the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins, let's get them done. Let's show we're serious by just whittling through the obvious stuff. And I couldn't agree more. But in order to get the big stuff done, you're going to have to measure it, because you've got to have a plan. You're going to have to measure it. Is it that easy these days to just pick up the phone and get a reliable provider to measure your carbon footprint? You know, again, to the small business owner out there, this could seem quite scary, I suspect.
Jamie, I'm going to make a plug. After you've signed up for the Better Business Act on the link in the chat, go to the one that says bcorpclimatecollective.org tools. As a B Corp community, we just launched that yesterday. That is,
oh, what timing!
That is the most incredible set of resources for all sides of the company, but there's a whole section for SMEs about how to break this down, how to think about it, how to take those first baby steps, and then how to go on to measure, who to talk to. So there's just an incredible set of resources there. And
Great.
Again, back to my point about collaboration, that has come from B Corps pooling their knowledge, working with University of Oxford and others to collate it into a really usable format. So hopefully that link will be incredibly valuable for people. So if they do nothing else,
Thanks, Douglas.
click on that link and mine it, because some of those questions that you've asked will be there.
And to build on that, I think you know, we do a lot of sharing with other businesses. So they ask us, because we've been doing it for a while, B Corp. And likewise, we before, when we were starting, we went to other people like us and asked them. So reach out and ask
and ask competitors, because apparently, Douglas, we're all in it together. We're all going to help. Okay, I'm going to move us on if I can. Thank you for that. I did want to do a very quick round the table and ask what other planetary issues and constraints that you have set targets for as businesses, but we don't really have the time for it. But climate is only one of 7 major planetary constraints, of which 3 of them are in real danger at the moment. And I know a number of other targets will be set by you guys. But I want to move on to society, and I'm going to do my own little plug for the best book I've read to get you thinking on this stuff, which is Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. I'm a groupie, a Kate Raworth groupie. I'll follow her everywhere. It's a very simple graphical representation of where we need to be as a society, but also where individual businesses need to think of themselves, which is in between this place where we are meeting the needs of all of our people within the constraints of the planet, and that's the sort of the middle ground of being in there. I want to talk to the needs of society for a second. Natalie, you've mentioned the United Nations Social Development Goals, but let's talk about social purposes in a little bit more detail. I'm going to talk, Doug. Innocent has its charitable foundation. It's had 7 million quid over its life from Innocent's commitments to give 10% of profit to charity. At least that's what I saw on the website last night.
That now we're over 10.
Over 10. You need to update the website, mate.
No, the whole thing's getting replaced, so that's why it's not been updated for a while.
And Doug, Mindful Chef has its One Feeds 2 program. Now, these are the sorts of things that business has always done. You know, we've got our foundation, we've got our nice little CSR initiative, but for both of you, I think they're embedded deeply into your organizations and linked thoroughly to purpose. So how do we how do we get basing on those examples or elsewhere in the panel, how do we make sure the stuff we're doing isn't the classic old CSR initiative that makes us look good and does a bit good, but is actually ingrained or entwined with our purpose and our mission?
Yeah, I mean, others jump in, but from and Jamie, you'll know this from having been in the business, that the foundation is a sort of central heartbeat for the business. You know, not only in terms of how we involve people through sort of foundation guardians and people being involved in all the different projects we're in, but again through the foundation, because we live purpose, vision, and values. Obviously, our purpose led us to supporting through our foundation. We support the world's hungry, and but we also bring our values to that. And we said we wanted to be effectively an entrepreneurial investor in the charity sector, which is one of our sort of key values. And through that, and particular focus on severe acute malnutrition, we've invested in some things that no one else would invest in because it was too risky, and is now proving transformational. And you know, very shortly, UN are going to adopt this approach that we've proven as the model to treat severe acute malnutrition, which means we'll be saving from that risk-taking approach millions of lives thanks to the Innocent Foundation, you know, over the next sort of 10 years. And you go to be able to take that back into the business and say, this is what living your purpose, vision, and values mean. It's just this incredible reinforcing wheel that is so powerful.
And Tim, your program.
Yeah, I think that we wanted something that we always wanted to give back. We wanted something that was really practical and that people could really easily understand. And so the idea of, you know, we provide people with a meal that they cook, and in doing that, every time they buy one meal from us, we give a meal away to a child living in poverty that doesn't have a safety net. You know, it's a school meal for free that they get, so they get education and they get a meal. That felt really pragmatic, and you get your head around it. I think, you know, we're a pragmatic business, and I think it's really important for customers to be able to connect, and for our teams to be able to connect with it and go, oh yeah, I get that, I understand how that works, that makes sense, that feels like I'm contributing while I'm doing something for myself to make myself healthy, I'm helping others. So like a simplistic, but I mean, I think you've just got to be adaptable as well. You know, during the pandemic, we said, look, a lot of that is not close to home in terms of where we're giving us further away, because, you know, we believe there's not a safety net in other countries, so we're going to create one ourselves, but close to home. And so we said, okay, well, look, we'll give a contribution. So to all NH staff, we said, well, we'll give a third off our meals, because it's the right thing to do. It's how we live our values for our business, and that's how we can, and we think our customers can help in terms of giving back. So I think it's dynamic, you know, and you just got to be pragmatic about what makes sense for your business and in your space that you work in. I'm sure everyone in their spaces have got things they can adapt to.
And Natalie, you know, I didn't ask you that question because the social mission and the business mission are so entwined, as you've already described. But can I step back a little bit to you as a social entrepreneur who's now running a business that has a sort of is all about its social, it's entirely about its social purpose. I think you've said to me before that, you know, if you want to change the world these days, do it through a business, set up a business to do it. So talk a little bit about that, because that's a slightly different take on this to the social entrepreneurs who are in the room today, for whom setting up a charity might be the preferred route to change. What's led you to convert to the side of capitalism for change?
Oh, Jamie, I haven't converted to the side of capitalism. I've always believed in capitalism. I do not believe in greed. You know this. Look, you know, I've spent my career, public sector, charities, being a social entrepreneur, running my own business that was all about good without, you know, doing anything by way of changing articles, but just living on purpose. And what I realized is the challenge of running a charity in the areas that I'm interested in is you spend most of your time asking other people for money and not enough time doing the doing, not enough time helping change systems, not enough time with people in need. And what I love about Belu is every decision I make, every conversation I have, I am doing both. I am creating a product that people need. If you do not drink water, you will die. And in doing that, I am helping other communities around the world access clean water in a sustainable way in addition to challenging the drinks industry to think differently about packaging and consumption, and also challenging other businesses to think about the way that they show up in society. And so it's a win-win. I don't have a trade-off of either or. And I think the next wave of businesses that are started by the younger millennials and Gen Z, I think you'll see less of them starting charities as a solution to the issues they see in the world. And you'll see more of them starting for-profit businesses that inherently exist to tackle something that they believe is wrong with the world.
You know, it's interesting. I think back, and Natalie and Sally, for the audience, they are both on Altogether's advisory board, because even the advisors need the advisors. One of the, when we set up Altogether, it didn't even come into our minds whether we were going to be a charity or a corporate structure. That was a question that came at the end. What's going to meet the needs of what we're going to do? We set out what our purpose was and what we were going to try and do. And then we figured out how we were going to get money to make that happen, which wasn't, I didn't want to be about begging, because I like you, I don't find it sustainable. And then we just chose the structure that fitted. So, but it's about the thought process of being commercial, I think, of seeing where value is and having shared value that is the pattern. I'm going to move on to the last area, which is people, and I mean our teams. And this week our panels have discussed everything from diversity to mental health, flexible working, open communications, all part of sort of being human and behaving and treating our own people with respect, care and equity. But I want to come back, Sally, to you and talk a little bit about money and people. You know, you made a very simple request that everybody in the audience pays or has a plan to pay the real living wage to their lower paid staff. But do we need to do more and to think more deeply as business leaders about how the economics of business or the profit or the wealth of business is shared? And both in terms of looking at the inequality, or the, let's not call it the inequality, but the stretch from the CEO to the average pay and those kind of measures, or indeed shareholdings and wealth, how it's distributed as an exit. How much more do we need to be doing? So it seems like paying the real living wage is just step one here, no?
I think it's the bare minimum. I think if you're making your way in the world as a purposeful company, you have to look at all the interested parties, and that's suppliers, your staff, your team, and your shareholders, and take all of them into account equally. So when we're saying, you know, paying fair wages, that also means to suppliers. So again, I think gone are the days which are just like beating people down to the lowest price and really not caring about what that means to the cotton picker, the tea picker, whoever it is. It's thinking more consciously about, you know, what's the most I can pay as opposed to the least I can get away with. And that also occurs for share of company as well. I mean, most companies, young companies that I work with, have shared ownership models now, because again, there are some challenges with that. But why would you not do that? Why would you not look at sharing the profits of everybody's labour equally? I would also add that to suppliers as well and customers. And I think when we look into the future, I think there will be whole conversations around how do we share dividends with suppliers, even how do we share dividends with customers. We're moving to a stage that customers, consumers are such a part of our ecosystem that they want more than just to be passive recipients of the product. They want to be involved. So I think that the really challenging forward-looking companies are looking at all of these things and saying, how can we share equity? How can we share success? How can we share the load equally? And that's all, you know, also the work. So how do we make sure that everybody is putting in equally and also taking out equally? I think for some of the smaller companies, it's actually easier than some of the bigger companies. I think there are some challenges around the shared ownership model. And I think shared ownership doesn't mean shared accountability always either. I remember when I was running Miss Selfridge, actually, having a session with my mentor, who was Hilary Reaver, and moaning to her about, well, my team won't do this, my team won't do that. And she said, no, they don't, that's your job. And I think there is a certain thing with leadership that, you know, if you are a leader, you do have to take responsibility and accountability. That doesn't mean that your team can't share into both the knowledge of what's going on, and also, as I say, the fruits of labour as well.
You know, Greg Jackson, the founder of Octopus, was keynote yesterday, and he had a lovely line. He said, by all means, get rich. And he was talking to the entrepreneurs. By all means, get rich, but make others rich along the way.
Yeah.
And he, you know, his business is doing incredibly, right? It's unicorn now. So if he makes this statement, it's partly because he has had so much success. But he thinks basically option ownership, the equity ownership of every member of his team, will give them a life-changing sum of money if he is successful. Now that's one end of an extreme, but I think it's the sort of beginning of a mantra. The other one I'm really fascinated by is we're beginning to see more and more family-owned businesses not hand the business to the next generation, but sell it to the employees and turn it into 100% employee-owned, like the John Lewis partnership. And it always interests me in John Lewis's story, it wasn't employee-owned to begin with. The original John Lewis founder was not this way inclined. It was his son who took that leadership and changed the culture and the organization, the purpose of that organization, which is a lesson for us all that leaders can make change. Tim, with inequality, such a hot topic these days, what else can we do as business leaders to be thinking about these questions of value and shared wealth?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's, you know, wealth is not just about money, it's about what you can give your employees. I think it's super important. We've just gone through a really difficult time. So you're investing in people's mental well-being, giving back, recognizing the differences, recognizing inequalities and giving people opportunities, and recognizing it with yourselves. You know, I know I go on about it, about measuring it, but we've just done a measurement of diversity in our own business to understand where we stand. You've got to start building that to then build back in to say, well, okay, how does my business and how do we as a leadership team make it as relevant for everyone and give people the most opportunities? It's and there's simple steps to do. You know, you can ask people to fill out stuff and gather that data. I think super important is supporting people on, you know, people can get really invested in having investments in a business. Fine, you can give them shares, you can give them options, etc. They can be part owners of the business. But I think, you know, what really matters to them is that they feel invested in terms of their development and their own self-development. Do they feel that they're growing as individuals? Do you give them more responsibility? You know, well,
you can't do one. You can't do one without the other, or you shouldn't do one without the other.
So I think wealth is more than just the reward. It's that whole package.
And then the one that I think doesn't get a fair hearing is power distribution, and the voice of the employee in business, and whether employees should have seats on boards or things like this. Natalie, what's your view on the sharing of the power more evenly?
I'm all about the sharing of the power, as long as it comes with accountability and full understanding of the consequences. So I just want to come back to Greg's point and also to Tim's point. I will never be rich off the back of growing Belu.
That's because you give all your profits away now.
Exactly. What I can give everyone is a sense of being free. I can make them happy. I can ensure they're healthier. I can ensure that they feel fulfilled and enriched in their lives as a consequence of the work they do. And so that brings me full circle back to power. We've had a conversation around what does that look like? How can we create a shared leadership model? I came into the business as CEO. I asked my COO to join me as co-CEO. Lots of people were like, well, why would you do that? I'm not a megalomaniac. We want to grow, and we will grow faster doing this together, because I can focus on the UK and recovery, and she can focus on international and scaling the business, and neither of us will be distracted trying to look at each other's portfolios, but we work hand in hand to deliver a strategy that we co-created to take the business from where we are now into the future for the next 10 years. And so that was sort of that bit of the leadership structure. I created a new executive team, and then everyone we brought on board, so we did a round of hiring. We changed the process and asked everyone a strategic vision question. So on day one, we had an understanding of everyone that we were onboarding, their ability to think strategically, regardless of the role that they were coming into. And everyone in the business is a lead. We don't have any managers, you lead, you own. And everyone was inducted into the business to own something. So yes, do your functional day-to-day, but everyone had a project that they owned end to end that they breathed back into the business. And I think it's those small tweaks to how you engage with people that gives people ultimately a sense of power within the business, a sense of being able to make decisions, which gives people a sense of agency and autonomy, which then leads into the freedom, the feeling happy, the feeling content. And if you pay everyone well and are transparent about pay, so we never put a job ad out that doesn't say what people are being paid. My salary is very open and broadcast. I say it on a podcast. People know exactly what they're getting. And that is the thing. I think that's the next wave of where we get to with this.
Okay, thank you. I've got one eye on the time, and we have questions that I'd like to come to, and I'm just checking that I haven't missed off something I really wanted to touch on. Let me come back to that. I want to ask, first of all, and this question I think was directed at Nat, but I think we can hear from all the panelists if you've got something to say on it. What about resistance from the board or shareholders to this sort of change when you've enacted it? So Nat, when you did the changing of the articles, Sally, when you have seen this in businesses where you've enacted change, what kind of resistance has there been, and how do you get over that resistance?
So for me, I wear two hats. I'm an executive, but I'm equally a non-executive. So I approached the board with a non-executive hat. I've been a chair with a chair hat, and I warmed everyone up before we got to the conversation around these are the changes that I want to make. And the warm-up process is the why. What's Belu here to do? And where are we falling down in terms of governance, ultimately the thing that they are there to do? And what are the things that we can do to align back to our why, to align back to our purpose, to really be able to walk the walk end to end. And it's really difficult then as a board member, given you are there to do governance, yes, other things, but governance, given you're there to do that, it's really difficult to say no if the case has been made, if you've done the measurement, if you've collected the data, if you've got the evidence, and you're pointing to the future direction of the business. So that's what we did, and it wasn't difficult. We got a yes, and we made it happen.
That's a lesson for board management 101, right? Don't bring something to the board you haven't got everybody aligned on beforehand if you want it to happen. But I think in this particular case, you learn also from talking to those board directors, right?
Yeah, and Jamie, I feel passionate about this topic in the sense that, well, in my case, I was lucky, and for those who don't know, Innocent is owned by Coca-Cola, and going to them to talk about B Corp and saying, as part of that, we need to change our articles and make this shift to balancing people, profit, and planet. It was in AOB. It really wasn't. It wasn't a main topic because it was like, well, yeah, that's what you do. So that,
that's why they bought you, right?
But at the same time, for those that aren't that and are using this as a moment to change, I think if a passionate, capable leadership team goes to their shareholders and says, we want to do this, we're aligned as a leadership group, we want to do this, there's a pretty brave shareholder that says no. I think there's a lot of leadership teams hide behind oh, my shareholder won't wear it, I don't know how to do this, or I don't want to do this. But don't hide behind that. If you want to do it, and you've got a capable leadership team, and you take that to shareholder, they're a pretty brave shareholder in today's world that says, no, we don't want you to do that, at risk of that talent then walking. So
that's a really interesting point.
Own it.
I was just going to say, taking both those points, but I think there were so many facts and figures now to show it's a really good business move. Again, the opposite of sustainable is unsustainable. You're not going to be there unless you do this stuff. So what I would do in terms of warming up board members is I give them the facts. There is so much reading. you know, whether it's pure business, and I actually go to talk to boards that I'm not even involved with to persuade them to do this stuff. And I will do heart and head calls. So the heart call is, why would you not do this? You're in this massive, you know, wonderful privileged position that you can make a difference. And I can talk all about that. But then I can say, but if you don't believe any of that, just look at the data. Yeah. And the data shows that you will be more successful, you will attract better employees, get more customers, and make more money. So, you know, it's again really got to say no to.
You're quite involved in the private equity space, and my view is they're probably the last group of institutions to the party on this. The private equity or venture space, I think, is there, has been for some time. You're actually an advisor to the Future Business Partnership, which I pretty much might call the only private equity house in the UK that's about purpose-driven businesses. But the private equity space, I think, is still a little too short-term focused and harder to move on this stuff, but I might be wrong.
I think they're really moving quickly. They see the money that B Corps are making. You know, I think it's really in the 10 years that I've been talking to boards, it's now like, yeah, when I get to, and private equity people as well, they want to know the facts, because they want to know you're not giving too much, that you're still going to make profit, that, you know, all the things you're doing are going to help your company, but they are. So again, coming back to, you know, if your private equity companies are normally run by really smart people, what they haven't necessarily had in the past is the evidence that doing good makes you make good money, and now the evidence is there.
And in their language, you might have a slight hit on the short-term EBITDA, but you're going to get a high multiple at exit. So, you know, go have fun. Tim, last word for you on this.
Just make sure that you know, if you're a small business and you're going through investment rounds, just bake it into your articles, bake it into everything you do. Don't make it a little small thing that doesn't get documented. It's absolutely core part of your business. Document it. You know, I think it's so important. Then it's a natural part of the board discussion. It's not just an AOB.
Bet it in. Thank you very much. I've got one more question to each of you, and we've asked every panel this week. So, listening to your colleagues on this panel, what's the one bit of advice that you've heard that from someone else that you're going to take away today and implement or use or remind yourself of? And I'll go in the order we did our speaking, if I can. So I'll start with Sally on that.
I think the thing that's reminded me today is how generous good businesses are at talking to smaller businesses and helping them. So what I've been reminded of is of the smaller business that I'm working with to ask them to be brave and to reach out to other business leaders of particularly B Corps, actually, because I think the B Corps community is very supportive. But, you know, go and ask for some help, and, you know, you might be surprised, you might get it.
Great. I've forgotten who was next now. Tim, were you next? Yes, yeah, Tim.
I really love what Sally said. I sort of asked the difficult questions and the probing questions. You know, do you pay the real living wage? I think those are great kind of on the button questions. That sometimes
tax. I'm not going to forget that one, Sally. Are you paying? Yeah, are you paying your tax, people?
I think
Natalie.
For me, they open up much bigger, bigger questions about the business and open up a much bigger discussion that you can have. And so they're really great prompts and really useful in discussions.
Okay, Nat.
Mine was, are you paying tax? Are you paying enough tax, the right amount of tax? That's the big question now.
Sally, we didn't even get to where your money's coming from, which is the other one you wanted us to ask, right? You know, do you know where your investors' money from? Doug?
I think I'm going to go, I love Tim's perspective on that sort of social purpose giving back piece, just being really clear on how do you make that simple for consumers and your employees to understand. And, you know, almost we give 10% of profits to charity, but is it clear and simple enough to sort of say, well, what does that mean? And just, you know, we've always had that bit of niggle of, does it work hard enough? And made me reflect that we need to go around that one again.
I have to say, I think you guys have given a wealth of really good direction to small businesses today, and actually all business leaders today. We've talked about defining purpose. and if we don't embed the social into that, then define how you want to contribute to the world and the planet and society. We've talked about get those low-hanging fruits out of the way, start showing momentum, which I really love that idea. If you haven't started yet, then you just have to get the low-hanging fruit. Tim, you've banged on about measurement, and I know you know all the panelists have talked about this and agree with this, but you've got to measure it to plan it. You've got to measure it to set targets, to have a plan, to know where you've got to work hard. And then I'm going to do the call out on B Corp again as a resource. I'm going to do a call out for the Times Top 100 as a resource too. That came out yesterday on culture and making sure you're a really great place for people. You get some really good comparable data and you compare yourself to others. And I'm going to end by, on Douglas's behalf, reminding everybody, please do join in the campaign. Sign up, get your company to sign up to the Better Business Act. Let's give Douglas that breadth of British businesses saying we want this change. And let's help him and the team at the BBA achieve that goal. I couldn't have been happier with today's session and the summit overall. A huge thank you, Sally, Tim, Natalie, Douglas, and to all our panelists and to our speakers this week. Thank you, everybody who's given up your lunch times for these 3 days. I've run 2 minutes over, which is the first time it's happened this week. But 2 minutes is a record for me. I'm impressed. Thank you very much, everybody. Big thank you for those still on the line. To the Altogether team, Gussie and Billy, you are exceptional and extraordinary, and thank you so much for all your hard work. We will hopefully hear from you all soon. If you want support from Altogether, go to the website. If you want to volunteer as an advisor, we need more advisors, and I'm going to say it, I need more female advisors and I need more ethnic minority advisors. So tell me who I should go and arm wrestle to come on board and join us as an advisor, or if you are there in the audience today, please do sign up at altogether.company. Thank you again to everybody. See you soon.